My name is Manasa Chalasani. I'm a product manager here with the Google Cloud networking team. And I also have with me here Greg, who manages UI teams for us, Arunima, who leads UX research for us, and Jason, who's a customer of ours from Pivot. First of all, some logistics. Number one, no snoring. And number two, as we go through the presentation, you can go to the next app, click on the Dory Q&A, and you can ask us questions as we go through the presentation. Dory is just an internal Q&A app that we have to be able to manage all of your questions at scale, and we can kind of get back to you even after the session ends in case we're not able to get to your question. So we'll go through these questions, and we'll also take live questions at the end. So over the past few years, we've been talking to a lot of our customers around how they manage their cloud network, what are the key pain points, how exactly do their workflows look like, and where they spend a significant amount of time while they're troubleshooting issues. And based on this, we've been building a suite of products. So we thought what we could do today is actually talk through the top issues that emerge based upon those conversations, introduce a few of the products that we built based on that, and also walk through exactly how you can use those products to be able to solve those top pain points that we identified. And you'll also hear from Jason here around how he thinks about solving these use cases at Pivot as an additional perspective. So thanks to all of you who have spent a significant amount of time with us in one-on-one settings and workshops, providing feedback to us as we built our products and iterated on them. So here's what we heard from you. Overall, I would say we could categorize these issues that you brought up into three broad categories. The first one was network connectivity issues. So think of it as everything from a broad question around, I want to know all that's there on my network and what talks to what, all the way to very granular questions on how can I resolve connectivity issues to a specific port on my VM. The second category of issues that emerged was around network troubleshooting. So when an issue comes in, you want to be able to very quickly understand if this is a network issue, number one. And number two, then be able to very quickly isolate the problem itself where it lies within the network. You also told us that you wanted us to be more proactive in letting you know when some of your metrics like bandwidth or latency are beyond the norm for what's average for your network. The third set of issues that emerged were around network security. So these certain examples around this category were things like you wanted to understand all the firewall rules associated with a VM instance, go into very quickly understanding if there was a very specific firewall rule that was causing problems for you, and also identifying who might have changed certain rules or touched certain rules in your network. So based upon those top concerns that I talked about right now, I wanted to talk to you about 4 specific products. I'll introduce the products, and my colleague Greg will do a deep dive on them. The first one is network interface details. So network interface details gives you a VM's view of the network. You can, in a single page, see the key attributes for that VM instance and the network interface. You can also view all the firewall rules associated with that specific VM instance and the effect that those firewall rules have on that VM instance. So that should allow you to very quickly diagnose network connectivity issues and also verify if only the intended ports and protocols are accessible for that specific VM instance. The second product is VPC flow logs. So VPC flow logs provide responsive flow-level network telemetry for your GCP environment. Think of it as analogous to NetFlow for those of us used to that. VPC flow logs provides near real-time telemetry without having any performance impact to you. So it also provides a granularity that you might be comfortable with. You should be able to collect metrics for, say, a VPC network or a subnet, or drill all the way down to be able to collect metrics around a specific VM instance or a virtual interface. And it includes metrics like throughput and RTT. The next product I want to talk to you about is firewall logs. So firewall logs get you visibility into every single connection attempt against a specific firewall rule that you have logging enabled for. So you should be able to see and audit all the connections that were allowed and those that failed. And you should be able to take that information and understand patterns, perform some real-time analysis, as well as be able to kind of ship it off to Google Cloud Storage for future forensics and audit use cases. And the last one, the fourth one I want to talk to you about was load balancer telemetry. So this monitoring provides you visibility into all of your internet-facing applications. You get metrics and visibility for both the front end and the back end, and it includes metrics like number of requests, latency, again, for the front end and the back end, and the connections that were open, that failed, as well as throughput. So we talked about network interface details, VPC flow logs, firewall logs, and load balancer telemetry. And with that, I will pass it over to Greg for a deep dive and demo of all of these. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Manasa. So as Manasa mentioned, rather than going through the features themselves, I thought we would go through a couple of demos that showcase how we can use the tools that Manasa was talking about in order to deal with real-life problems. Right. Sorry, can we go back to the slides? Yes, thank you. Okay, so I wanted to, again, go through some practical use cases and things that you encounter on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that we realized when we were doing our research and we were looking at the problems you encounter is that you encounter a very difficult or tricky problem once in a while. The rest of it is death by 1,000 cuts. Right? So the typical use cases that we find people struggling with are very basic things like connectivity. So let's go through use case number one. Imagine you're a back-end engineer who's decided to use a new database for your project. You're developing it locally and everything works just fine. Now you're ready to stand up a test environment, you create an instance to run your app, you create an instance to run the database server, you start the app and it hangs, right? Of course, it's like Friday afternoon, you've been working all day to do it, it's 4:30, you're ready to go home, meet somebody, hang out. Unfortunately, it's not working. So let's go to the demo and talk about how we can resolve or troubleshoot what's going on. Okay, so I'm the developer. I'm happy. I've set up my entire environment. Here's the IP address. I'm ready to go. I hit enter. It's hanging. Okay, it might still be, oh no. An error has occurred. Okay, what do we do now? So if you are a network admin, you are sure it's an application issue. And if you're a developer, you're sure it's a network issue. Right, that is one thing that's a fact. So the developer will probably at this point start looking at application logs, trying to figure out what's going on. And the root cause of the time delays here are mostly because we don't know where the problem is. All right, so we don't know if it's a network problem yet, but if we can rule out the network, that gives us a really good hint of where we can go looking next. So let's see how we can use the network interface details page in order to rule out any possible issues with the network or to prove that there are issues with the network. So this is my GCP project. Here's a web server. Here's the MySQL server. Ignore the suspicious host for now. There's nothing going on there. We'll look at that one later. Okay, so the web server is here. This is what I'm connecting to. And the database server is here. Right, so let's click on these three dots on the side. And right here, there's something that says View Network Details. First, I'll give you a quick overview of what the page contains, and then I'll show you how to use it. The top part are the attributes that Manasa was talking about. These are things that we found were sprinkled through the console everywhere. They were on the details page. Some of these things were buried in subtabs on the network, on the instance details page. It was very hard to pull all this together. So just by pulling it all together, we found that we're adding a lot of value by showing you the things that are the most important to this instance's behavior on the network that it's on. Right. Beyond that, we looked at firewall rules and routes. So if you have a VPC network in production, you probably have hundreds of firewall rules, maybe even thousands. If you wanted to understand which firewall rules were applying to this instance, in the past, you would go to the firewalls list page and go through all 1,000 of them. I'm not kidding. All 1,000, one by one, decide which ones apply, which ones don't, create a list of those. So we thought we can do that better. So we did that for you, right? So these are the firewall rules that are applying only to the specific instance, taking things like tags and other things, service accounts into account, right? We do the same thing for routes. Right. So now we have a list of firewall rules, but that still means you have to go through each one of them and apply those firewall rules in the order that the control or the data plane actually applies them. All right, so we took it a step further and we created the network analysis section. This is what's here at the bottom. So let me explain what's going on here. It's not necessarily the easiest concept. So we are creating a two-dimensional grid. On one dimension, we have all possible ingress sources. On the other dimension, we have all possible protocols and ports. We run through all of the firewall rules one by one, and then we open and close port source combinations, and then we come up with a model, a two-dimensional model, of what can access this instance. We do it for egress, and we do it for routes as well. After we do that, we dump all of that out into a tabular form, most specific IPs to least specific. Right? So I happen to know the IP address of my database server. It's 10.0.0.3. Right? I can check to see whether the database server can access this instance. Actually, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested to see if this can access the database server. So I'll look at egress and see, this instance can access everything. So it's certainly not an outbound firewall rule. It could be an inbound firewall rule on the database. So let's go to the same page on the database server. All right, that was the web server. Here's the database server. View network details. Scroll down to the analysis and find web server has an IP address of 10.0.0.5. So scrolling down, here it is. Everything is blocked except for these ports. Now it's a MySQL database, so if you know what MySQL runs on, it's 3306. It's not there, it's missing. That's the problem. It's a firewall rule. I can go up here and find, oh man, there is a firewall rule. Someone did create it. It's just disabled. So I can click on the firewall rule, edit it, turn it back on, patiently wait. Let's refresh just in case. Firewall rule is active. I go to the analysis and I see, 3306 is now allowed. That looks good. Let's go back to the error page, refresh, and it works. I know it's hard to read, but it says it works. It's pretty happy in the corner there. All right, so that was use case number 1. Let's go to use case number 2. Can we go back to the slides, please? All right, use case number 2 is about network security. So your network security admin at your company has a process for auditing all new sensitive systems, like database servers, to ensure that access is limited to what's absolutely necessary. And you're leading an audit for a new database server, right? So the one we just stood up in use case 1. You want to verify, obviously, that only necessary ports are open per the documentation of the dev team. You want to understand what's connecting to that server, and you want to understand what your security posture is blocking. All right, so if we could go back to the demo. I won't go through the network details, the network interface details page again, but I think you can see how this would be very helpful in understanding what can and cannot access an instance. Let's look at some things that actually show what's happening. All right, so we talked about VPC flow logs and firewall logs earlier. Right? So this is actual information of what's happening on the network. Every single packet that's moving around your network, well, not every single packet, every single flow is captured. Right? And this is an example of a particular flow. All right, so I've gone to the stack driver logging section in logs. I have VPC flow logs enabled. I've hit subnetwork, that's the resource that this is on, and then I look at VPC flows. Here is one object that represents a flow that occurred on the network. You'll see some helpful information. So the 5-tuple is nicely located here, and then some annotations like the destination instance and the destination VPC. So annotations that you can use. Right, so this is actual traffic on the network. We do the same thing for firewalls. Right? So every firewall rule that has this enabled will generate logs. Right? So here is a firewall rule that denied a particular piece of traffic. And we have information about the instance, we have information about the connection, again the 5-tuple, so nice and familiar. Right? And then some information about the firewall rule itself, which firewall rule it was, what the action is, effectively metadata that's on the firewall rule. All right, this is interesting. However, there will be thousands of these records, and we're obviously not going to go one by one and look at what's going on. All right, so you can take this a step further and export this into BigQuery. right? Or really anything that does analysis. I've chosen BigQuery for obvious reasons. It was easy. It was a one-click operation. When I did that, all right, I constructed a query that will take all source IP addresses, the action of the firewall rule, right, the reference as the name of the firewall rule, and the amount of times that firewall rule was hit. So effectively creating a firewall hit counter. This is coming from the firewall logs. And I'm looking at things that are specifically trying to access the MySQL server we've been looking at earlier. A quick group by, and then I order by counts. I hit run, and we give it a couple seconds. And let's look at the results. Oh, actually, I could just hide the editor. Right. I instantly notice that this IP address, 10.0.0.4, is being denied a lot. All right. So today, over 14 million times. So this instance, this source IP address, is trying to access that database server that we were looking at earlier. And that's a problem. So I go back and I take a look at what could that possibly be. And if you were paying attention earlier, you've guessed it, that is suspicious host. Right. Now, why is suspicious host showing up here? Because I'm running Nmap from the suspicious host against the MySQL server. So we got that very, very quickly. We see what's being blocked, and we actually see that some things are successfully passing through. I could augment this query and show things like port information, effectively anything that was on the firewall logging record from before. All right, and one more use case. So could we please go back to the slides? Thank you. Use case number 3. So we talked about internal use cases a lot, but let's say your application goes to production. So you've put it behind an HTTPS load balancer for a lot of reasons. What tools can you use to monitor and gain visibility into that traffic? Right, so in this example, let's pretend you're a global e-commerce company. You're deployed in 3 regions, the US, Europe, and Asia, and the site is made up of different smaller applications. So it's pretty complicated. And if you've been to any of the load balancing talks that we've had about HTTPS load balancer, you know it's global. Right? So we give you one IP address, customers connect to that one IP address, and it's routed to the resources that are closest to them. So obviously, if you're in the US, you want to be served by US resources, and the same thing with Asia and Europe. So how can we make sure that's happening? Well, let's go back to the demo. All right, so here's a list of load balancers that I have in this project. The one that we're talking about is Shopping Site LB. I'll click on it. Configuration is pretty complicated. There's browse backends, there's carts, there's a checkout, there's something called feeds, test HTTPS. And I'll go to monitoring. And in monitoring, we see right away the number of requests per second across the backends that are in this load balancer. If I look at a specific backend, let's say browse, I get this cool Sankey diagram at the bottom. And the Sankey diagram is showing something very interesting. The locations here on the left-hand side are the entry points of traffic onto the Google network. Right, so customers in North America, their traffic is entering in North America. And typically, there are resources that are configured. For the purpose of this demo, I've taken them down. And as a result of that, that traffic is being automatically distributed by the Google load balancing infrastructure, mostly to Europe and a little bit to Asia. The traffic highlighted in yellow is effectively out of region. So it's being served out of region, and this is much higher latency for you. Right? The customer has to go all the way to Europe, and the request has to come all the way back in order for them to be served. On top of this, there's a bunch of other load balancing metrics that you can look at. I won't go through all of them. I realize it's probably hard to read, but we have things like latency, latency to the back end, latency to the front end, in addition to things like requests and throughput. All right, so those are the 3 use cases I want to go through. Could we please go back to the slides? And I'd love to ask Arunima to come and join me. Arunima is a UX researcher, and she'll talk about some of the research that we've done on this topic.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. As Greg mentioned, I am Arunima, and I am a UX research lead. And me and my team have been working with a lot of you, trying to understand, some of your challenges and pain points, and then bringing it back to our fabulous PM and Eng team to work iteratively together so that we can fix some of those problems. And we, through the last couple of years, have worked across EMEA and US with our customers who are in different verticals like finance, retail, health, gaming, etc. And also, we've been talking to network architects, cloud architects. If we have not talked to you yet, please do stop by, and we would love to talk to you so that we can get your feedback as well. So as we were trying to organize this discussion and this talk, we're thinking, well, there might be many different ways of solving the same problem, and you might be like at the end of Thursday or in the beginning of Thursday towards the end of the session bored by just listening to us giving demos or presenting. So we thought it might be interesting for you to hear actually feedback from your own peers as to how not only they are using some of our tools, but other tools that they are using to solve those problems. So we thought that it might be interesting for us to invite Jason Cradit, who is the Senior Director of Technology at Pivot, to come and talk to us and talk through some of the use cases. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Arunima. I appreciate it. So as Arunima mentioned, I'm Jason Cradit. I'm Senior Director of Technology at a company called Pivot. You've likely never heard of Pivot, and Senior Director of Technology may not tell you a lot about what I do on a daily basis. It's a little ambiguous. So I am the IT operations and security guy. We just have cool titles. We're fancy. So Pivot is an oil and gas engineering company predominantly. We focus on helping our customers transport oil and gas and electricity from one point to the other. We start by developing analytical solutions to help plan where to build a physical asset in the United States, and then how to transport it, construct the asset, and then manage it and operate it. I am based in Kansas City, so all of you San Franciscans, we are not Madison Bumgarner fans by any stretch of the imagination. But my dev team is focused, or lives in Denver, Colorado. And then because we're so predominantly focused in oil and gas, we've got a large Houston group as well. That's Pivot.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason. Before we go into some of the use cases, can I ask you, why Google? Why now?
Oh, good question. We started our journey into the cloud around 2012. And we really wanted to create an application for people to use in our industry. That in our industry, oil and gas and energy and utilities, it's not heavy IT by any means. My users are not heavy IT users. So we started with Google Maps. We wanted to make it somewhat easy and familiar and just sort of normal. They're used to it on their phones already. So we wanted to help them create a fast and simple, intuitive interface. And then we started getting into that ecosystem. We said, well, Google Apps for Business makes a lot of sense for us to store documents and collaborate. And then as we go through time, we started to just be immersed in Google and decided, why not be in GCP as well?
That's great. So it looks like you are using the whole ecosystem.
A lot of it.
That's amazing. So next, Jason, we would like to talk through some of the use cases that Greg demoed on and see and understand your perspective on them. Sounds great?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's pretend that you are actually working, with a developer on your team, and who's developing a new database, and everything is working great locally. But as you're getting ready to test in the environment, and you create an instance to run your app, and then the instance on the database and a new instance as well, what you see is that your app is hanging. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, no, there's no reason to pretend. This is a normal day in my life. And we have great developers, so if there's developers here, I'm sure you're great as well. But it always works on their machine, right? Always. And yet when they throw it over to my team to go and implement in production or put it into the cloud environment, we notice issues, obviously, and it doesn't just work as we'd hope. And as Greg outlined, it's typically, they're ready to get out the door on a Friday afternoon, and then my team has to take it over to implement into production or into a dev or staging environment. So this has happened quite a bit recently. We've been transitioning. I mentioned we started in the cloud in 2012. We started traditionally with a 3-tier architecture. And now, more recently, we've been moving to microservices as an architecture and some serverless. And so there's a lot of volatility in our environment right now. And so through that process, every little piece we have to take apart and deconstruct and then start putting into new environments. And when we've used Docker and containerized quite a bit of our application. And what happens is, in a 3-tier architecture, you've got kind of your border, network security, defense, and then each tier, your application and so forth, has its own firewall rules and things like that. In a microservices architecture, it's not quite like that, right? You start to have millions, probably not, but thousands of firewall rules that really define your environment, define the security context of your environment. And so when you run into this problem and it's hanging, you just got to scroll through pages and pages and pages of firewall rules and data to try to figure it out. And certainly there's tools out there, and we've got great documentation like everybody does about our environment and how it should work. However, you still need to solve the problem. You still need to go find the right rule to change, to modify it. And because I own networking and security, it's my team's role to go do that. So historically, we would scroll through the rules, we'd search for IPs and things like that to try to find protocols. And it's difficult. It was really, really difficult. It's very time consuming. So with the new tools, like Greg mentioned, with network details, now it's like 2 clicks away, right? So now we don't have to spend all this time searching for it. It's really quick to see the instances view of its network, just like that. It's amazing.
That's great. I'm very glad to hear that that the network details page is actually solving some of your problems. So now you and your dev can both have beer?
Yeah,
At the end of
exactly.
the day. Okay, so now that you and your dev are having a very happy time, let's move on to the next use case. So the next use case here is, let's pretend now that you're working with your network security admin, and you are, as Greg mentioned, doing an audit for a very sensitive system, and you wanted to verify that all the necessary ports and that the dev team has documented are open, and then understand what connecting to the server and determine what security posture is blocking. I'm sure with your passion in security, you have definitely faced some of this as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about it?
No question. We are very interested in cybersecurity, and in our industry especially, we're helping transport critical infrastructure assets around the US. And so we care a lot about protecting our customers' privacy. But it's also interesting to think about our customers aren't always comfortable with us managing their data in the cloud. So we've got an extra burden on us to help show how we're protecting it. And for years in the cloud, it was really easy to sort of say, yeah, we trust our cloud provider to protect it. We've blocked port 22 to the world, so we're good, right? And then we had auditors come in, and auditors are also, sometimes if they're here, I apologize, but not always as technically savvy as they go through a network infrastructure in the cloud versus when we used to do it on-prem. And so we run into these two issues where we've got to not only show port 22 is blocked from the world, but we've got to prove it in some capacity. And forever in the cloud, you could define the firewall rules, and they were set. And you're like, see, we're good, right? 22 is blocked. But you want to prove it, and you want to prove it's been like that for some amount of time. Now, with firewall logging, you can start to go and look and see and prove, nope, absolutely, we've blocked 14 million packets, today or whatever. And that's a functionality that's been lost in the cloud for quite some time. And now it helps me rest a little easier because we have more of a defendable posture when we talk to our customers and to auditors. And it helps us just convey the message and be more transparent, I think, with how we're protecting the data.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jason, for expanding on that. And you were also mentioning during one of our studies that, when we were actually coming and talking to you about some of these products like network details, VPC flow logs, and others, you're like, do I need to use them? And then slowly you started using them, and now you can't live without them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's funny you say that. It's interesting to me that I grew up on-prem, right? And I used to implement firewalls and built servers and networking and everything. And there's tools you don't realize you need.
Yes.
And there's tools that you sort of say, you take for granted. And you start out in the cloud, and there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and then you're like, yeah, it just works, right? But then you start to really take it seriously, and you're like, man, that's easier. It's so much better to have instance level details. If we could do that on-prem, or could have back then, it would have been amazing. But that's sort of the power of the cloud, right? It allows you to build new methods for solving old problems.
Awesome. Okay. Last but not the least, I know that when we have talked to you previously, you have been a big advocate of monitoring and having visibility into some of the metrics that Greg was showing. So the last use case we had is like, now your application is in production and you have a HTTP load balancer. What tools are you using currently to monitor and gain visibility into traffic? If you're using our tools, how are you using them?
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate that. It's interesting. We, as we moved to microservices architecture, we put a load balancer in front of everything, even if we don't need to. And we started doing that mainly because we thought we don't know what we don't know about our infrastructure, right? And if we start putting a load balancer, we gain some of the like stack driver logging and things like that. But then also we get context for how our traffic is working. And what's interesting, always been interesting to me, is load balancing is very much a IT sort of operations network problem. But you gain situational awareness of your environment, like context for how your traffic is actually shaping. So it's been interesting for us to put load balancers in front of everything so we can start to visualize the traffic, but then also understand it and understand how our customers are using it. And as Greg showed, maybe we forgot to set up logging. It never happens, guys, trust me. But maybe we forgot to set up logging and we didn't know our North America servers were down or our West Coast or East Coast servers were down. And now by visualizing it in Stackdriver, we can see, oh man, we're routing to the wrong place. We're creating a problem for our customers. It's adding latency where it's not necessary. So we like to dashboard it inside of Stackdriver. We do use another tool, I think it's called Sumo Logic, to do a lot of our visualization, more for dashboarding's sake. But my team predominantly uses Stackdriver when they want to really get in to the nitty-gritty of what's happening in the infrastructure.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Anything else that you would like to add that, some of these use cases we talked about, maybe some other stuff that we've not mentioned and you would like to mention to the...
Yeah, if I could shameless plug some things, we do take cybersecurity really seriously at Pivot, and we're really interested in helping protect our customers' data and the data around their assets. So we use a lot of tools to protect all of the core functionality out of the cloud, like firewall logging and BigQuery and things like that, help us gain better context into our environment. But we also use tools at the application layer, like Trend Micro's Deep Security. I think I saw a booth for them here. It's a great tool. You guys should definitely check out their booth. But I think more than anything, I made a comment earlier that it's interesting to me that you guys create tools that we didn't know we needed. And I really appreciate that. And I know I've seen some Googlers in the audience, and I guess I would say thank you for continuing to make my job a little easier. It's hard in IT operations and network to go get more resources. We want to hire more developers, and we want to hire people who can make our products, get them to market quicker, and that's good. We need that. But what I really need is to make my job a little bit easier. So I appreciate the tools you guys develop and listening to us and developing them for us.
Thank you, Jason. So I'm sure that you might have tons of questions for Jason and Manasa and Greg. But before we do that, before we start taking some questions and have an interactive session, I just wanted to wrap up. As we mentioned throughout the talk, we've done a number of customer studies, on-site visits, workshops, design workshops, etc. So if I see some familiar faces in the audience, but if we've not talked to you, please do reach out to us. We would love to talk to you, either remote, on-site, whatever is convenient for you. If we don't understand and know your problems, it's harder to solve those. And we've released some of these products that Greg demoed today: network interface details, VPC flow logs, firewall logs, and also load balancer telemetry. So check them out if you haven't yet. And please do remember there's a lot more coming. So, stay up to date with our blogs on networking.